Moderators for this session, which is going to go this morning from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock with a small break in between, will be Dr. Jim, who's the Chair of Vascular Surgery at Abbott Northwestern Hospital, and David Rigberg, Program Director from UCLA. They've put together a wonderful panel of both speaker and panelists. And again, we want to encourage folks to use the Q&A and or the chat. We'll be looking at that and want to make this as interactive as possible. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff and David. Welcome everyone and look forward to today.
Thanks, Jason. On behalf of Dave and I, we want to welcome everybody to this session. It's going to hopefully be useful for you. We've asked some really esteemed program directors and program coordinators to share their experience of some of the potential challenges that you may encounter, as well as sort of delineate some of the duties. We'll be taking questions along the way, so definitely send them in through the Q&A and the chat. We'll make sure they're addressed. The agenda is set up to have a discussion session at the end of each hour. We'll start off, we wanted to try to do a Zoom poll to kind of get some engagement. So if we can fire up the first one, this is just a couple questions if you can kind of click on and tell us a little bit about yourselves in terms of your role in your training program, if you're a program director of 2+ years or less experience, if you're an APD or a program coordinator who's joined us as well, and then tell us a little bit about your institution, what type of training program you have. And if you don't have one yet, certainly this is still a great opportunity for you to ask a lot of questions. So if you just take a couple moments for that as well. We will be sort of throwing in some Zooms along the way, polls. So apparently I can't vote as a host and a panelist. So hopefully everybody else out there in the Zoom versus voting, because
you did not just say Zoom first, did you?
I did. Hey man, we've been all living in the Zoomverse for a year, so. Okay, well I think that, oh, here we go. We can see, nice. We have a variety of different experiences here, so we've designed the program as such. Please, again, I think what the value of this program is really to be able to go ahead and look at, ask a lot of questions, have the leader. So we're going to go and get started. So the first person is my pleasure to introduce from University of Florida. What happened there? What? Sorry, Dave, I thought you said something. So no, I wanted to introduce Sal. He's a program director down at University of Florida. I wanted to have him come speak to us a little bit about what he thinks is a short, obviously not going to be complete for the time we're giving him, of the duties of a program director. Sal, I think you got the screen and the mic.
Yes, thank you very much and good morning. Congratulations to any of our new program directors. And without further ado, we'll try to get off and stay on time. Clicking, there we go. I have no disclosures. For preparation for this, actually an incredibly useful resource was the use of this website, which actually lists and provides a 52-page document that outlines all of the sort of boilerplate language and specific program requirements that are needed for program directors who are just learning their new responsibilities, or for institutions that are actually developing programs. It really outlines most of the requirements for both the independent fellowships, which are 24 months in length, or integrated residencies, which are traditionally 60 months in length. For you to have a program, you need to be an ACGME accredited institution. You can have multi-site training for your institution, but you do need a program letter of agreement with the other facility, and you do need a designated core faculty member at that other institution that's not a program director to be in charge of trainee education. There are specific requirements for resources that are needed for your trainees, and they're kind of sort of obvious when you look at them, but they do need to be met, such as office space, software resources, online radiographic laboratory reporting system access. You do need an accredited ultrasound vascular lab for vascular lab interpretation and training. You do need to provide at least access at the minimum. I do know that most programs will provide vouchers, but at least access to food while on call, working day or night. You do obviously need to have a sleep space for your trainees. You need to be able to provide private spaces and or refrigeration for lactating mothers. If your trainees do have specific disabilities, you have to be able to accommodate them. And then educational resources within the institution need to be made available, including electronic database access with full text resources. And then ultimately, there should be teaching opportunities integrated into the program, specifically if there's other residents on service. There's going to be a talk later in the program about the money, but at the very least, in terms of salary support, there needs to be at least a 20% of your FTE needs to be allotted for the program director, and 30% if you actually have both the integrated residency and fellowship. You should be boarded in vascular surgery, and generally, most people, although we learned that many of the program directors that are on this meeting today have had less than 5 years experience. Usually, most program directors have a minimum of 5 years of experience after their terminal training before they've assumed that responsibility. But there obviously, it can be institution specific. There is no requirement to appoint an associate program director unless you do have more than 10 trainees. Specifically, the 2 personnel requirements that are fundamentally required, there's more than this, but at the bare bones, it would be a program director, and there's sort of an outline of the multiple responsibilities that the director has in terms of recruiting faculty, oversight of policies, obviously sort of making sure there's compliance with policies and basically adjudicating grievances and assuring due process. But you also are in charge of designating the core faculty, at least 1 per trainee, and those core faculty have to complete the annual ACGME faculty survey, which are out now currently. And then the program coordinator, who has to have at least a 0.5 FTE allotment for their responsibilities to your program. And if there's more than 10 trainees, it should be a full FTE allotted to that program coordinator. And if you have more than 20 trainees, you would technically need a second coordinator. In terms of curriculum, there's going to be a talk by Dr. Bularaj to follow to give you a more robust outlining of this, but at a minimum, the ACGME educational requirements do give some guidance on what your curriculum development should be. It should be competency-based. It should have delineation, a clear delineation of responsibilities with graded supervision, and there should be structured educational time. There are sort of 8 competencies within the ACGME curriculum that has to be satisfied. And again, I won't go into great detail because Dr. Bularaj will be able to outfit that in his talk. There are defined category minimums that your trainees have to sort of make sure that the program can meet for them, and they're sort of listed there for your reference. Obviously, this is critical in terms of making sure that you have a robust educational and operative experience to have competent surgeons who ultimately finish the program. In terms of conference and scheduling, when you develop a schedule matrix, at least 4 weeks per rotation is, you really can't have less than a 4-week rotation designed in your curriculum. Fellows and chief residents truly could theoretically coexist, but they really can't have primary responsibility of the same patient. So that's why it'd be difficult to have a general surgery chief resident, for example, with a fellow trainee on the same rotation. Technically, you're supposed to have biweekly conferences. I know a lot of programs have integrated conferences on a single day, but oftentimes that's at the division level, and then they'll have something for the Department of Surgery on a separate date, but it's actually written in within the actual bylaws from the ACGME. Trainees should be allowed to have an active participation in these presentation of conferences, and you're at a minimum want to achieve 75% attendance over the course of the year and 50% attendance for core faculty. And you need to design the curriculum to develop education for patient safety, QI projects, disclosure of adverse events, and diversity training. There are evaluation for the trainees. There is a semi-annual assessment and clinical competency committee that the program directors and the program coordinator work together to appoint and work with and collaborate with. They use objective performance and evaluations, and we'll have milestone updates that will come with Dr. Velasquez this afternoon on the main meeting agenda. The PD meets with each trainee after these evaluations to provide them feedback. That's a requirement. There's also the summative evaluation at the end of each year, and then the final evaluation upon completion that goes into the trainee's permanent record that has to be documented. There's also needs to be a mechanism for evaluating the faculty. Obviously, it must be confidential so that the trainees don't fear any retribution. And then it should be part of the program-wide faculty development plan. There is a program evaluation committee that needs to be appointed by the PD, and it has to be made up of at least 2 program faculty members, a core faculty, and at least 1 trainee. This is all sort of a part of the self-study process that every institution has to complete. And these annual reviews are submitted to your institutional official, usually a dean of education. And it also has to occur with the onset of your 10-year reaccreditation visits. In terms of well-being and duty hours, there's a lot of language about the requirements that need to be sort of integrated into the training program to facilitate this, including efforts to mitigate fatigue and management strategies for training and how to sort of deal with this, not only during your training, but after you've sort of transitioned to practice. There should be administrative support. Attention to the schedule should be paid by that program director. Obviously, tracking work intensity and workplace safety. You have to allow attendees to attend their medical visits, and that should be built in. And burnout training and provide confidential access to mental health services should all be available. I think we're all familiar with the 80-hour work week, but here's the specific requirements that are necessary to fulfill. And they're sort of listed there for everyone's reference, but I think everybody's pretty used to this requirement, and it obviously pertains to both vascular trainees at the fellowship level as well as the residents. And then I'll leave you with this sort of timeline. There's a lot that goes on during the academic year, and I built this timeline with a lot of assistance from my program coordinator, who sort of keeps me on track. And it sort of starts with that transition between July and August, with your finishing off and graduating, and then you're doing your onboarding of new trainees, and then it sort of progresses through the fall, and then we develop into the recruitment season as ARIS opens in October. And then you get into the sort of November, December, and you start going through your evaluations, your clinical competency meetings, and milestone evaluations. As you turn the corner and go around the corner, you sort of see we get into the match, and the rank lists are due here coming up April 28th. And then we'll have our match day on the 12th of May. And then the cycle sort of repeats from there on out. Ongoing with all of this are evaluations at the end of each rotation that are required. So I'll sort of stop there to try to stay on time. There's a lot of useful resources that are available, and I've sort of listed them here in the talk, but they're also available on the APDBS website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Scali. That was incredibly useful information. We really appreciate it.